Hello, fellow Econauts, and welcome back to our show. I'm here with my brother Ben, the Rocket Man. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey Simon, hey fellow Econauts, how's it going? What's the topic today, Simon?
Topic today is Virgin Galactic, the ticket to space.
Hit the intro.
So, what is Virgin Galactic?
It doesn't really need that much of an explanation, but as usual, we try to pick everybody up from wherever they are. So literally, like Virgin Galactic, more or less. But anyway, so Virgin Galactic has been founded 2004, so 20 years ago by Richard Branson. He had initially the goal to deliver satellites into low Earth orbit with a plane and injecting the satellites this way. That part was later split out as Virgin Orbit, and Virgin Galactic became a pure space tourism company. So the goal now was to bring private people, private astronauts into space, into a certain height, so that they can say they have been in space. That's above the Kármán line. Um, and yeah, so the idea was to use or the idea is they use a twin plane. That means they need to operate that. They need two pilots at the same time. So it's two vehicles welded together over one wing in the middle, and then two wings to the outside. And in that middle wing hangs the space plane. And once they have reached a certain height and certain speed, they launch that space plane, and that will then go into orbit and carries the actual tourists with them.
It brings me to my next question. The challenges that Virgin Galactic faced, and of course also the space tourism industry as a whole.
Well, I think the first challenge is the prices are very high. So in the moment, it's really just an exclusive ticket, let's say, to space for people who can afford it. Currently, I think a ticket is about $460,000 to do this. And I think to be truly a space tourism company, you have to find a way to make it cheap enough, not cheap, but affordable for people in the middle class to do such an adventure. The other thing, obviously, is launching from and starting from a high populated area always involves interaction with flight regulation authorities. And therefore, it's not like, oh, we plan to launch tomorrow. Or, there's a lot of planning involved. They need certain launch windows where they can do it. However, they have done successful launches already. They have sent astronauts into space. I think 10 launches so far with astronauts, if I remember correctly. And now but the next challenge now is they just started turning profit, and they decided to change the actual carrier, not the carrier plane, the plane that sits on the mothership, which carries the astronauts. So they want to retire the current version and bring a new version, which will take them 2 years to be able to carry more astronauts at once, which could lead to lower prices eventually.
Well, what is the future of Virgin Galactic in your opinion?
In my opinion, Virgin Galactic will start to show that they can maintain and sustain as a company while delivering astronauts into orbit on a very regular basis. But I believe in order to get there, they need more spaceports. Not only the one they are currently operating from, but also at other locations on the planet, just to reach other customers as well. I mean, now you could argue for $460,000, you're more than willing to pay the price to go to America for a ticket. But at the same time, you want to bring the costs down. And also, you want more than one set of planes to operate. So there's a huge potential for every new spaceport to have a Virgin Galactic on subsidiary on site, and then to operate space tourism from each spaceport, because that is, in my eyes, a tourism stream or an income stream for the space economy in general. We have talked about space economy. Obviously, it also involves other activities such as just watching launches and other things alike. But I see a huge potential. The other challenge every company has that launches people into space is we need to the perception that if something happens, or if something happens, also the public eye is very, very closely looking on what happens. That means you cannot afford to have an accident, especially when you have private astronauts on board. So imagine you have, a NASA mission. These are trained astronauts. They have years of experience. They're getting trained for the mission and everything. But Virgin Galactic obviously wants to take the everyday Joe. Maybe now in the moment the a rich everyday Joe, but still it's an everyday Joe. They will provide an amount of training, obviously, but not as much as NASA would do, for example, with their astronauts. The second thing also, and that is a big comparison or big difference between Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, for example. For Virgin Galactic, you still need two pilots to operate the mothership. Whereas SpaceX, for example, they can completely, I mean, they have astronauts, they can control the launch, but they can also remotely and autonomously launch and land their rockets. So there's obviously a huge advantage for SpaceX on this side. But again, I think the idea is very unique. Although Virgin Orbit, which was, as I explained earlier, the split out of Virgin Galactic, failed because it was not a sustainable business idea for satellites. For humans, it's a different story. Humans, as I said, you need more safety. You also, I believe, you see more in a plane. The whole experience is much better for tourists when they first start with a plane. They can see, they see normal airplanes start and so on, and then they get launched from when they're already high above. And then also they have way more visual to the outside. You see way more from the whole procedure. You then have your flight in orbit with a small orbital dip into the low Earth orbit, where you can then actually see the Earth, and then you go back and land. I think it's a bit like a roller coaster. You see more in a short amount of time. If you want to do space tourism with a SpaceX rocket, for example, you would have to remain in low Earth orbit for a while. Otherwise, the whole cost would not really play out very well for the exercise anymore.
If you have more spaceports available, that also means that if there are any kind of weather restrictions in one area, they might not apply in another. We talked about having like spaceports in certain areas make just more sense. But I also think, you cannot predict the weather. That's basically it, right? And if there is like any kind of weather pattern, not very fortunate, at least you have a secondary launching platform available, right?
Well, secondary, tertiary, the more
Yeah,
the better, really.
yeah, the more the
But
better.
I mean, is the weather predictable? Yes and no. To a certain degree, it is, obviously. Otherwise, we would not stop operations when the weather forecast is bad. Would you send an astronaut who sits currently in America, for example, on an ad hoc note to another spaceport around the globe? I think that would not really happen. So I
No, no,
think,
no, that's not what I, that's not, I'm more talking about the business perspective.
yeah,
You lose a lot of money if you cannot launch, right?
yes,
If you
that
have
is
to
true. Yeah,
postpone.
that's true.
If you have like a
Yes.
secondary platform or, more than one spaceport available, then at least the other spaceports can be operational, even if one of them has like bad weather conditions and cannot have a launch. That's what I meant.
Yes. Also, don't forget you have to come back, and if you have more than one position available where you can actually safely land your spacecraft, albeit this one you could argue can land on a normal airport. Still, it is an advantage if you land somewhere where you have the actual staff and equipment to refurbish that spacecraft. So if you have multiple of those available around the globe, very helpful. There's a prediction. There's an article where Virgin Galactic claims that every spaceport that runs a Virgin Galactic operation has a $1 billion income opportunity. Of course, you have to unlock that first. Of course, you have to find the customers. Of course, you have to be able to safely launch. There's many challenges, but I think it's worthwhile to overcome those, and then make a actual space tourism business happening. It's unique in its way because it's as I said, it's not a competition to SpaceX because they are not competing for the same thing. SpaceX is trying to get to Mars pretty much, and they bring down the launch cost to bring payload into orbit. Yes, a tourist in that sense is also payload, but it's different payload, right? It's making the analogy with a truck transport again. You cannot transport um, livestock animals in the same truck as you would transport
Furniture.
other parcels,
Yeah.
or if you need fresh food that has to be refrigerated. So you have different vehicles for different purpose, and I think the concept of Virgin Galactic makes more sense for space tourism.
I think that's also showcasing that there is like a lot of potential available to invest in the space industry right now. If we look back, we already mentioned that it's 20 years. It's not only Virgin Galactic that it's 20 years old. I think SpaceX is celebrating a similar birthday as well. And we made that point last time when we were talking about Sputnik. It was like 20 years between Sputnik and the first man on the moon. I think it was like about 20 years.
It's
So
about, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so we are basically right now in that time window, if you really think about it, with the difference that we have the private sector now interested in space, and I see a huge potential also for businesses to basically become profitable, right, and successful in that regard.
Yes, I agree. As I said, there's lots of really good ideas out there already. A lot of companies already operate, at least behind the scenes, to a certain degree. But I think the next step is really to make space boring pretty much. You have to make it more accessible. The highway to space is extremely important. You need more cadence to launch. You need different styles. Heavy launch to lift lots of stuff, to reduce the price per launch, to bring things into space, stuff like that. Then at some point we might have another space station because, as we all know, the ISS will retire at some point in the near future. So there will be things we can visit as well in space. And
And there's
I
also,
think,
I'm sorry if I interrupt, but there's also a huge potential with keeping in mind that the next space station might already be like having a layout for a space hotel,
yes,
basically.
yes, yes,
That could be an option. And I also wanted to make the point that if we look back 100 years ago, the first planes, basically, the first airlines forming, I think that a lot of people were also like suspicious about, traveling through air when there was still, horse carriages
yes,
around.
yeah,
The car was just, becoming available for like more and more people. I think we are right now experiencing the next jump in human evolution, which is like space, which is like very, very exciting to me as a as a Star Trek nerd. But
yes,
but I can see that um, companies like Virgin Galactic, they would not invest so much time and energy if they wouldn't see that there's a potential. And
yes.
I think that this is a safe bet that um, with the next spacecraft that they are building right now. I think it's available 2026, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the plan, yeah.
That's at least the plan. Let's see how it works. I'm very excited to see how far they will get with their next spaceship, and of course also SpaceX. I think that we are living right now in a very interesting and very exciting time.
Absolutely, yes. Very exciting indeed.
Yeah. I would like to stop here for today. It was very nice talking to you as always. If you liked
Thank
that
you.
episode, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already.
And don't forget to hit the notification bell. And
Exactly.
also, we have a lot of other episodes already available, so make sure to browse and enjoy.
All right. I hope I see you next time. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye.